I was 18 when my parents handed me a rent agreement for the bedroom I'd grown up in. They called it building character. I believed them. I paid every month. I covered part of the electric bill. Later, when they said the roof needed repairs, I added more auto transfers labeled roof fund because I didn't want us to lose the house the way we almost did when Dad lost his job. Last week, I stood in my sister's new kitchen and saw the closing paperwork on the counter. The down payment number looked painfully familiar. The roof was never fixed, but someone else's house was. The summer I turned 18. Dad had been out of work for almost 8 months. I still remember the quiet in the house, no radio in the mornings. No casual grocery trips. Mom staring at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of unopened envelopes. Once, I walked in and saw her crying. She wiped her face fast and said, "We'll figure it out." 2 weeks after my birthday, Mom knocked on my bedroom door. "We need everyone contributing," she said gently. "It's not punishment. It's responsibility. It'll build character." She slid a piece of paper toward me. $450 a month. My childhood bedroom now had a price. I didn't argue. Dad had just picked up part-time work. The mortgage was still hanging over us. I told myself this was what good daughters did. That fall, I started college full-time and worked evenings at a pharmacy. My first paycheck didn't go toward books or savings. It went into Mom's checking account. I labeled the transfer rent. It felt official. Adult. Over time, the contributions expanded. A portion of the electric bill, my own car insurance, occasionally, groceries when things were tight. Mom always framed it carefully. "We're not asking because we want to," she'd say. "We're asking because you're capable." Capable became the compliment that cost me the most. Tessa was 13 then, too young to be expected to help. Everyone agreed when she got older. Though when she started working part-time at a boutique, no one mentioned rent to her, Mom would say. Let her focus on school, or she's still figuring things out. By 23, I had graduated and started working full-time as a nurse. The rent didn't stop. It increased slightly, to match inflation. I didn't question it. I told myself it was fair. After all, I was living there. Whenever friends asked why I didn't move out, I said it made financial sense. I was helping my parents stabilize after a hard period. I was doing the responsible thing. And every month, without fail, I transferred the money. I never thought to ask where it accumulated. I assumed it went exactly where they said it did to keeping us afloat. It was my mother who first mentioned the roof. I had just finished a 12-hour night shift and was halfway through reheating leftovers when she called. "We had someone come look at it," she said, her voice tight. "The shingles are curling. If we don't handle it soon, insurance won't cover future damage." The house had always been her pride. The idea of it deteriorating seemed to scare her more than the bills ever had. How much I asked? She named a number that made my stomach drop. Not catastrophic, but far beyond what they could cover comfortably. "We'll need to build a small fund," she continued. "Just until we can schedule the repairs. It's temporary." Temporary was a word that sounded safe. We agreed I would contribute an additional monthly amount. I set up a separate auto transfer labeled Roof Fund so I could track it. It felt organized, responsible, like I was preventing another near crisis. Over the next 18 months, the transfers stacked quietly. I didn't monitor the total obsessively. I trusted the purpose. When I asked once or twice about progress, Mom always had an answer. "We're waiting for the right contractor. Prices are fluctuating. It's better to save a little more so we don't cut corners." Each explanation was reasonable on its own. During that time, Tessa moved back home briefly after a failed apartment lease. Mom told me not to worry, she's just regrouping. I noticed she wasn't contributing to utilities or groceries. When I asked gently whether that might help the household, Mom sighed. "She's in a fragile place." "Marin, you're stronger, stronger again." I started picking up extra shifts to keep up with my own savings goals. I skipped a friend's destination wedding because airfare would have meant dipping into emergency funds. I declined a weekend trip with coworkers, telling them I needed rest every month. The auto transfer cleared one afternoon, about a year into the roof contributions. I mentioned the fund casually to Dad. "Did the contractor give you a timeline yet?" He looked confused. "What contractor?" "The roof," I said. He blinked, then shrugged. Your mom handles that stuff. I let it go, not because it didn't matter, but because I didn't want to imply distrust. I told myself Dad probably just wasn't looped in. The transfers continued. The roof never changed. No new shingles, no scaffolding, no scheduled repairs, just a quiet, accumulating total that I assumed was protecting the house we had almost lost once before. I didn't realize I was protecting something else entirely. I found out on a Sunday afternoon. Tessa had invited us over to see the place. "It's nothing huge," she said in the group chat, followed by a house emoji and 3 exclamation points. I assumed she meant a new rental, maybe something modest. When I pulled into the driveway, I knew it wasn't a rental, fresh sod. A sold sign still staked near the curb. The kind of neighborhood with identical mailboxes and carefully trimmed hedges. Inside, the house smelled like new paint and cardboard. Tessa was glowing, walking us from room to room like a real estate agent. "Can you believe it?" she kept saying. "We finally did it, finally." In the kitchen, while she showed Mom the pantry shelves, I leaned against the counter. There was a folder sitting open beside the sink standard manila. Nothing secretive about it. Tessa must have set it down mid-celebration. I didn't dig through it. I didn't need to. The top page read, "Closing disclosure" in bold print. Below it was the breakdown, loan amount, interest rate, and the down payment figure. I stared at the number longer than I meant to. It wasn't just large, it was familiar. On the drive home, my chest felt tight, not panicked, focused. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my banking app and filtered by transfers. I selected the label. Roof Fund. 18 months of monthly deposits appeared on the screen. I exported the transaction history and added the numbers. The total wasn't identical to the down payment, but it was close. Close enough that the difference could easily have come from savings or tax returns. 92%. I sat back in my chair. The roof had never been repaired. I knew that for a fact now. I had visited home countless times, no new shingles, no contractor trucks, no invoices taped to the fridge. Still, I forced myself to consider alternatives. Maybe the roof issue resolved cheaply. Maybe they reallocated the fund temporarily. Maybe they planned to tell me. But then I remembered something else. 2 months earlier, I had asked Mom again about scheduling the repairs. "Soon," she'd said. "We're almost there. Almost there." At Tessa's housewarming, Mom had hugged me and whispered, "You've always been such a blessing to this family." At the time, I thought she meant emotional support. Now I understood the blessing had been financial. I didn't feel explosive anger. Not yet. What I felt was recalibration. If the roof money had become a down payment and no one thought I deserved to know, then I wasn't contributing to a shared emergency. I was subsidizing a decision, and I hadn't been invited into it. The official housewarming dinner was the following Saturday. Tessa had arranged everything carefully matching plates, a charcuterie board spread across the island, candles that made the place feel staged but warm. Dad brought wine. Mom carried a framed photo of Tessa and her fiancé to bless the house. I brought nothing except a question. Dinner was light at first. Tessa described the inspection process, the bidding war, how everything just lined up at the right time. Mom nodded proudly, occasionally adding, "We helped where we could." Helped. Halfway through the meal, Tessa said, almost casually, "We're going furniture shopping tomorrow. The living room still feels empty." Mom looked at me across the table. "Mirren has such good taste," she said. "And she's so practical with budgeting. You should go with her." Tessa smiled. "Yeah, maybe you can help us figure out what we can afford." "What we can afford?" I set my fork down carefully. "Can I ask something first?" I said. The table quieted not dramatically, but enough that everyone felt it. "When you say, 'helped where we could,'" I continued, looking at Mom, "did any of the roof fund money go toward this house? Silence has a texture when it's real. It thickens the air." Dad cleared his throat. "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. Mom folded her napkin. "Mirren, sweetheart, it's still family money. We didn't take it and run. It's supporting your sister's stability." That wasn't the purpose of the fund, I said. The purpose was protecting the house, she replied. This is protecting the family. Tessa shifted in her seat. I didn't even know you were thinking of it that way, she said quickly. Mom and Dad just said things were handled. Handled with my transfers, I said. Mom's voice sharpened slightly. You've always been independent. We knew you wouldn't mind. You don't struggle the way Tessa does. There it was again, the compliment that cost me. So you assumed, I said quietly. Dad tried to soften it. We didn't think you'd see it as a betrayal. I let that word sit between us. Tessa glanced at her fiancé, then back at me. We still need some help furnishing, she said, almost defensively. Just advice. Maybe a little financial cushion. Mom nodded. You've been such a blessing. Don't make this bigger than it is. I looked around the table at the new cabinets, the untouched paint, the down payment built from 18 months of quiet obedience. I'm not making it bigger, I said. I'm making it clear. No one raised their voice after that. That almost made it worse. Mom reached for her glass and said, Measured. We never forced you to contribute. You asked, I replied, and you framed it as necessary. Dad leaned forward. We were in a hard place back then. I understand that, I said. What I don't understand is why the fund kept going when the emergency didn't. Tessa crossed her arms. So what are you saying? That I don't deserve help? That's not what I said. But that was the narrative forming in real time. If I objected, I became the selfish sister who couldn't celebrate her sibling's milestone. Mom's tone shifted from defensive to disappointed. After everything we've done for you, I almost smiled at that. Tuition loans I paid myself. Insurance I covered. Rent I transferred every month since I was 18. I'm not asking for anything back, I said calmly. I'm just changing what happens next. Dad frowned. What does that mean? It means the transfers stop. All of them. The words felt strangely neutral leaving my mouth. Mom blinked. You can't just cut us off. I'm not cutting you off, I said. I'm separating my finances. Tessa scoffed softly. Over this over-transparency, I corrected. I explained it simply: no more auto transfers labeled roof fund. No more supplemental utility payments. If there were future expenses, we would discuss them clearly and in advance. Mom's disappointment hardened. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm adjusting. Dad looked at me as if I'd shifted languages mid-conversation. Families help each other. They do, I agreed, and they tell each other the truth. No one had an answer to that. The rest of dinner moved in fragments: small talk, forced smiles, dessert served but barely eaten. I felt oddly steady, not triumphant, not furious, just recalibrated. On the drive home, I opened my banking app at a red light and disabled the scheduled transfers. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I pressed yes. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no ultimatums, just a series of quiet administrative decisions that would, for the first time since I was 18, redirect my money back toward my own future. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission. The next week, I toured a small apartment 5 minutes from the hospital. Nothing fancy: white walls, narrow balcony, old hardwood floors, but it was mine. The lease required no discussion, no negotiation, no moral framing. When I told my parents I was moving out within 30 days, Mom went quiet. Dad said, "You don't have to rush decisions like this." "I'm not rushing," I replied. "I'm planning." There were no dramatic ultimatums, just smaller changes. I redirected my savings into a separate account. I met with a financial advisor about long-term goals. I stopped explaining every purchase, every schedule change, every boundary. Mom texted, "Once you've changed." I didn't argue. I had, not into someone colder, just someone clearer, for years. I thought paying rent at 18 made me responsible. Maybe it did. But responsibility without transparency isn't maturity, it's access. And I finally understood something: simple strength doesn't mean being available. If this resonates, share your experience below and subscribe for more real family stories about boundaries and growth.